a really good PM can navigate any situation, find the information that you need, and get the right people in front of you pretty quickly. And if they can't, they're communicating with you well along the way. You can have really good services and a bad PM, and it can completely ruin the experience.
This is You Should Talk To, a podcast for busy marketing leaders who are looking for support and tips on getting shit done. In each episode, Daniel Weiner interviews marketing leaders and discusses their experience, successes, and failures around hiring agencies. If you're interested in finding and choosing the right agency partner, then let's jump in.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the You Should Talk To podcast. I am Daniel Weiner, your host. This podcast is currently brought to you by myself, as well as You Should Talk To. You Should Talk To pairs brands and marketers for free with vetted agencies and or freelancers for marketing and technology needs, because finding great agencies and freelancers is a giant pain in the ass. Super excited today to be joined by Ashley Remstad, who is VP of Marketing at HomeBot. Ashley, thank you for joining. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Before we even dive in, what is HomeBot? How do you describe it? I work with you and I don't know. I couldn't tell you exactly how to describe it in like 1 to 2 sentences or less.
And yes, here's my kind of 10-second explanation. We're a client engagement and retention portal, and we really aim to drive repeat and referral business for loan officers and real estate agents. That's the simplest way to put it. We are Credit Karma for the mortgage and real estate industry.
I do like that. You did that significantly more eloquently than I could have if you had asked me the same question. So I'm glad I have that now. Let's dive right in. You are in a brand side marketing role now. You're at agency for a while. What is an unpopular opinion you have in general in the marketing world, or a hot take of sorts? The more controversy, the better.
Yeah, I'm not sure how hot of a take this is, but I think, there's kind of an ongoing joke of marketers are obsessed with best practices and templates and playbooks. And the truth is, there's no right way to do anything. I think that it's really easy to get really caught up in staying up to date and being the most advanced and following best practice. And the truth is, whatever works for you, whatever is driving pipeline and revenue and value for your business is the best playbook. The second thing is that, we're kind of in this market moment, which is really difficult for people. And I think that it could be one of the best things that happens to the industry is, we sort of saw this massive pivotal growth. And now everybody is forced to sort of cut spend. And what happens in a recession is that you get a lot more creative. And because you're forced to, unfortunately, and there's less spend in the market, there's less noise. So I think that, when we kind of rise from the ashes, we will all be for the better.
You Should Talk To was born in September of 2020 during, I don't know if it technically counted as recession then, but a fucked up time in the world and the economy, pardon my French. But no, yeah. I totally agree. I do think marketers oftentimes, once they get, I would say to your level, VP and higher, are obsessed with playbooks because they're scared to do something different. And they want somebody in their network or somebody they know and admire and trust to tell them, here's the thing I did that worked and just do this. And I promise you that it will work, which is, we'll talk about it a little with agencies. I think that's oftentimes what people get wrong with agencies too is, oh shit, let's hire an agency. They'll figure it out. They know what to do.
Yeah. And the truth is too, once a playbook is written, once a best practice is out there, it's likely outdated anyway. And there's probably thousands of other people trying to copy exactly that same thing. So you're behind the curve. So why even try to copy? Of course, stay informed, but whatever is working for you is the best playbook. I truly believe that.
Yeah. The most common hot take I get from folks lately, which I'll ask you about, I'm curious, is that marketers have just become so insanely obsessed with measurement, which I've thought for a while, coming from agency side, like everything has to be measured and has attribution and all that sort of stuff, which in my opinion hinders creativity. I totally get it now more than ever, especially when economy is messed up. Like everything needs to have revenue in mind. But what do you think of the obsession with attribution?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is certainly being spoken about a lot right now. I think it's just a natural shift from a perspective of gen to demand gen and not being able to track everything. I think it's so weird, especially coming from an agency space, like, maybe, I don't know how old this is, but maybe 20, 30 years ago, like billboards used to be massive. That type of advertising used to be huge, which you really can't track. And then as marketers, we sort of grew out of that and we're like, we now have digital and we now can track everything. And we became very obsessed with tracking every single metric that you can. And the truth is like, when you're looking at metrics that way, you're almost never seeing the full picture. And it's also not how people buy anymore. You have a very, very complicated buying process. So I think, yeah, the move towards not being so obsessed with attribution software is the right move. I think, the best thing that you can do right now in terms of attribution is self-reported, and that'll usually give you the best bang for your buck. Is just someone filling out a form and telling you how they heard of you.
I think so too. If I try to get a sponsor of some attribution software now, they're not going to give me sponsorship dollars based on that comment. Now we have to go elsewhere now. So get a better sponsor in the technology space. But you mentioned, most of your career agency side. You've now transitioned into brand side as a marketing leader. Talk a little bit about that transition and kind of what that change has been like, how your mindset has shifted, I presume, a little bit.
Yeah. I think agencies, and, I'll definitely want to get into this more, but I think that agencies prep you for the unknown. And you're balancing a lot. You're working with a lot of different companies of all different sizes, depending on where you're at. And it makes you flexible. So if I'm honest, a transition was pretty easy. I had worked with a lot of companies that were the size of my company at that time. I knew exactly what they needed. I knew exactly how I could add value. And so it was pretty seamless, I will say. In terms of transitioning my role, there was definitely a learning curve in terms of being more willing to fail. I think as working at an agency, people are paying you as consultants and they don't want you to fail on their dollar. So even if it's testing, it has to be incredibly prescriptive and precise and time bound. And while that's very valuable, it also can sometimes lock you into a creative block because you're afraid of failing. And nobody wants to go back to a client and say, yeah, we were kind of bold with this decision and it didn't really pay out.
You get yelled at by different people now. Your C-suite or boss or something versus the client. Exactly. So a different kind of yelling.
It is. But truth be told, it did take some getting used to. Like, okay, like some of these walls are sort of coming down. It's a different motion, I will say. And so, yeah, it's been a really good experience overall.
And what do you think the biggest, I know you said, I totally agree, like coming from agency and working directly with brand, you presumably have more brain space to focus on specific things versus having 10 clients and stuff like that. But what's been the biggest the biggest difference just from going to agency and like go on behalf of clients versus focusing on one brand?
Well, there's definitely a bunch of different problems now that I'm faced with. I think, we've changed a lot in the past 2 years and, we're in the mortgage and real estate business. So that in and of itself, just being stuck with the economy has been a challenge. From a messaging perspective, from a branding perspective, positioning perspective. And so focusing things on long-term wins and really starting to have more foresight into the market and longer-term plays, I think has probably been a bigger challenge and something a little bit different of going in-house.
Yeah. To that end, you touched on the economy, like with it in flux and discretionary spending for a lot potentially low and layoffs and a lot of doom and gloom. What's your advice to other marketing leaders out there in your space or beyond? But I would say, you're particularly well suited to talk about a space that is getting hit, technology and mortgage and home industry and stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit about that? What's your advice to other VPs and CMOs out there?
Yeah, I think running a tight ship is really important. And what I mean by that is, it's obviously a lot easier to be more flexible with spend when you have more funds, and making sure that you're really close with the head of finance and that you understand your financial plan intimately is really important. I also think that translates to your team, and their OKRs should be associated with that financial plan, not even associated, but related to and locked into. And then lastly, I think this is definitely a hard time for marketers, but I also think marketers excel and are incredibly creative during these types of times. I think focusing more on all funnel campaigns instead of driving inbound and top of funnel, how can you accelerate pipeline velocity? How can you shift your focus more on customer marketing and retention? What does churn look like? How can you drive upgrades and expansion opportunities? How are you working with customer success and support? What's your product marketing play? Get close to your product and features, have a bigger impact there. I think that those are easier wins, and marketing is uniquely positioned to be able to work with all of the different departments and make an impact there.
It's funny, since I asked you about attribution, I hear from a lot of marketers that now is the time where they're leaning into attribution because they want to be able to have that relationship with their CFO to say hey, look what we did. Here's all this stuff that marketing didn't actually tie it to revenue to make sure that their budgets are either remaining or, that they're able to get an increase in budget that they're looking for to do different things. So no, that's the tie to the CFO is very good advice. Buy your CFO's coffees and lunches as much as possible out there.
I do so often. Yeah, lots of beers had between us.
That's great. I'm curious, your overall opinion on agencies, especially spending the brunt of your career so far at agencies. They get a bad rep, even though I work with, 150 of them. Love them, hate them. What do you think of them?
I love them. They're, it's my roots. How could I not? I think agencies do get a bad rap, probably because there's a lot of bad agencies out there, intentional or not. There's a lot of agencies that are not acting as partners, that are spreading themselves too thin, that are doing a poor job with hiring, that are not good business planners. Honestly, they haven't created a good business. And because of that, in an already crowded space, I would say there's a lot of bad agencies. And so agencies do get a bad rep. You've been burned once. That's all it takes, right? And
everybody's been burned once, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And any person on the sales side at an agency always is hearing war stories about working with a previously bad agency. It's just part of the gig. So yeah, of course, I think they definitely get a bad rep. And I think the really good agencies do a good job of positioning themselves as partners, an extension of your team. And they usually give you more than what you're asking for. And so, yeah, I love agencies. I think that they're incredibly valuable. I think they're a necessary component a lot of the times, especially in a high growth space. And agencies are my roots. I always tell everybody that if you want to make a good hire someone from an agency because they have a lot of skills and they're hungry and usually pretty gritty and want to get the job done. So
yeah, I think I agree with everything you just in general. I'd say I think a lot of the problem I see is there's 90,000 companies that identify as agencies in the US alone. A lot. Some of those are one person working from home who call themselves an agency. That's a whole other story. But I find too, the biggest thing I've kind of learned from doing what I do and working in between brands and agencies is, in general, folks in your role, when they're looking for an agency, will talk to 3 to 5 agencies. And the vast majority of the time, those 3 to 5 are not bad agencies or intentionally doing something wrong. They're just wrong for that particular brand and that particular scenario.
Yes.
And the marketer just settles oftentimes, or how are you supposed to identify the right agencies out of 90,000 to have a couple conversations with? I think that's the biggest thing. I find so many times where an agency will be like, oh, we were talking to these 3 and none of them felt right. And I'm like, great, who are they? Let me know. And they'll tell me, I'm like, yeah, I could have told you that they weren't right or they were going to be out of your budget or, all that sort of stuff. So it is hard. I would say the tagline I use is finding an agency is easy. Finding the right agency is really, really, really hard. So I feel for the marketer. It's tough getting inundated with agency requests all day long. And how do you weed out the BS?
Yeah, I very much agree with that. You got to find the right working rhythm for sure.
We talked a little bit about this prior to pressing record, and you just got back from an event where you talked about vendors respectfully following up or nudging you that they had been trying to get in touch with you. But in general, I'm curious, like, how often are you getting hit up? Because everybody I speak to in your role, it's roughly every 12 seconds, whether it's text, email, LinkedIn, and the whole shebang.
It's relentless. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot. As you mentioned, I was just at a conference, and while I thought it was mostly going to be industry professionals, networking, kind of learning from each other, there were vendors there, and some of them were, tracking me down. And it can be overwhelming for sure. It's an incredibly crowded space. I mean, if you have a problem or a perceived problem, there's tech out there that claims to solve it. And what I think is good right now is that, as I mentioned earlier, because of where we're at right now, budgets being cut, the economy, how it scales, and marketing is having to get a lot more creative. And while there's a lot of lazy salespeople out there that are just blasting you with emails and cold calls all the time, I don't even answer my phone anymore. But there's also a lot of pressure to get creative. And the people that are utilizing that as an opportunity, there's some cool stuff coming out there, and it breaks through the noise, The people that I reply to are usually the people with the most creative outreach, the best messaging, the best video, something that makes me laugh, something that is useful in that moment. So I do think that is kind of, because there's so much competition, that is something cool that it has come out of this.
I'm curious, you said the key phrase, in the moment. I'm curious, if you're not in buying mode, like if you don't need something, is there anything somebody can do? Maybe it makes you laugh, but is there anything somebody do that genuinely gets you to reply and take a call or anything, at least on the agency side?
Providing value, I think, genuinely, even if I'm not ready to buy, just staying connected and displaying how you can be a partner, which is long-term, like just being a good human. Sometimes it sounds so silly, but it's like just being a good partner. I had a very long sales process with someone that relentlessly reached out to me, and all he did, honestly, was provide value. Hey, what can I do for you? Is there anything that I can help your team? I noticed that your team is using this tool. Hey, I've done research here. I wanted to send you this. I thought you'd be interested in this. And he kept me connected and engaged for, I don't know, 6 months or something. And it worked. So you establish trust that way and authority, and people want to be in a collaborative space and feel like you can add value.
It's funny you bring that up. I think it was a record even for me. I recently got introduced to a brand late, or not that recent at this point, late last year, and it took 14 emails to get to the first call. And the deal ultimately closed, and their final email was, "I really appreciate you bearing with me." I don't know how much value I provided throughout, but respectful follow-up, since they had, I joke, if you tell me you want to talk, I'm going to follow up until I die, until you tell me that you don't want to talk, and then I won't bother you. So once somebody has told me that they want to chat and they need something, I'm following up. I find that's some of my favorites because I'm just so stubborn. I'm like, then tell me no. You already told me you wanted to chat. So
absolutely,
it's interesting to hear that. I had mentioned prior to recording that I hosted a dinner last week with some CMOs and VPs of marketing for myself. We had talked, agencies came up naturally. I didn't bring it up intentionally. And it was funny, like one of the bigger takeaways when people were talking about positives and also a lot of negatives with agencies, never the work. Like the biggest positives were around like commiserating with like the shit they're dealing with as a CMO currently and how they're all worried they're going to get fired in 15 to 18 months. People who make their lives easier, people who like, I know everybody says they want to be a partner, not a vendor and stuff, but like who actually like do it and don't just like put it in a slide as a in their deck of the slide, essentially. And nobody there was only really one person who brought up actual work. Like, this agency did this thing and this campaign and it was incredible because of X, Y, and Z. Everything else was like, I want to go have a beer with them. It's stuff like that, which I think is not like a groundbreaking thought, but I think a lot of agencies miss the mark on the rapport part.
I 100% agree. I mean, I think that comes a lot with just running a good business. I mean, usually agencies are hourly and they're hiring people on a needs basis, depending on what niche they're in, depending on how many services they have. And sometimes that comes at a cost with people are so busy. I've been there. I had 40 clients when I left my last agency, and it was like back-to-back meetings all day long, everything I could do to stay on top of all of the deliverables. And sometimes that's at the sacrifice of having real human connection because they're a checkbox. And so I think you're absolutely right. Like, it sounds so silly and so obvious, but the best agencies, it's a feeling. It's a rapport, it's a connection. It's a, how are they going to feel like an extension of my team? How are they going to work with me? How are they going to get ahead of some of my problems and offer value, anticipate issues? Like, that's really where a lot of the value comes in.
I talk to the countless marketers. I probably said this to you. We'll talk about your agency search here in a sec, but whether it's my agencies or not, it could be let's assume it's the worst decision you ever make. You hire them and everything goes awry and it's horrific. They ruin your life. On the front end, before signing the contract or when you're signing the contract, you should be so excited. All the warm and fuzzies, the promise of what it could be. Yeah, 100% it could turn out to be the worst decision you've ever made professionally. But before you start doing that and all the bad things occur, you should be really excited. And I think oftentimes back to that point of there's 90,000 agencies. You're probably going to talk to 3 or 4 when you're looking for something, unless you're maybe Coke or massive, huge brand who may talk to 30 before picking one or something like that. You should be really excited. And if you're not, you need to keep talking. You need to have more conversations until you get to that spot. I think oftentimes it's so fast. It's, we decided we need this thing. Let's talk to a couple. And whatever, we'll give the money to these people and hope it works out and stuff like that, versus maybe having a couple more conversations and reaching that, oh my God, we're really excited to work with these people.
Yeah, I fully agree. Establishing that rapport up front, commiserating, understanding the issues that I'm trying to solve, trying to anticipate that is value for sure.
In general, I know I think you're still evaluating agency partners on the website side.
I am,
During that process and beyond, now that you're in the brand side, what are you looking for? I know we just talked about it a little bit, but what are you looking for specifically from an agency when you're going through that process and they're talking about, in this case, a website? What makes an agency stand out during that process?
Yeah, I think everything we just mentioned, definitely you are definitely looking at their backlog of proof for sure. But that's kind of just table stakes, right? Everybody can do the work.
You think your agency experience, though, has made you uniquely capable of spotting BS? I joked. Yeah. I mean, to your point, every agent, even with me, when I talk to you, everything they say, I'm like, it all sounds great. But let's keep going, a little further.
Yes, absolutely. And I say that to vendors all the time. I'm like, before we get started, I just want you to know, I've sat in your seat, and that makes this both a good thing for you and a bad thing for you. Good thing because I understand where you're coming from. I can empathize with you. Bad because I'm going to cut through the bullshit really fast. Let's just have a table stakes normal conversation. I almost always set the stage like that. I think.
Has anybody ever just been shit, we're out, we're just done?
I think sometimes, honestly, people are like, oh, great, awesome. But I also think in the sales process, a lot of agencies make the mistake of not having a person in seat that understands the problems that the prospect is trying to solve. So have a marketing person on the call as much as you can. If you're selling to a marketer, have a marketing person on the call. And that sort of commiserating, understanding where we're coming from is so important. And yeah, getting back to your original question, what am I looking for? I'm looking for somebody with process, like established process. I will say that's like a pretty big red flag for me. And you can usually cut through things pretty quickly in terms of like, if they're sort of that like 10-person shop, but they're selling themselves as the 30-40-person shop that can do a lot, that's usually a pretty good way of just cutting through the BS. It's like, okay, walk me through what the process looks like. How would you approach this project? What phases do you have established? How do you manage the engagement? What should I expect from you in terms of a relationship? That's usually the types of questions that I'm asking. And then outside of that, it really is just a feeling and establishing a relationship within that first and second touch point.
It's a popularity contest first. I fully believe, you know.
Yeah, it's not a science. I mean, I do have a spreadsheet and I fill it out meticulously, a vendor spreadsheet, but it really is more of an art. And to your point, it comes down to feeling good about who you're about to work with. And
that's why like a lot of people I think that I work with presume or assume that like all the agencies I choose to work with, they think that I think are like the best agencies on the planet. And I say like, I would never introduce agencies that I didn't think were wildly capable at what they do. To your point, that's the price of admission. There's a ton of agencies who can do, you know, good or great work and stuff like that. When you think of it that way, it's people and process, to your point. Like, that's why I kind of like, I don't shut down 100%, but when I talk to a new agency to vet them and like they jump out of the gate with how different they are, I'm like, you know, and it's funny, I took a call, when was that? Yesterday, sometime this week, and they said, you know, they brought up how they were different because they treat their clients like partners, not just a vendor. And they told me that was like the differentiator. And I was like, respectfully, that is in 100% of decks that I see. 98% of websites, like not you saying it. And they were like kind of taken back, like other people are saying that. I'm like, everybody is, you know, it's the people who, again, they could be like, even if they're terrible at what they do, you'll still win business. If your people and your processor, you'll eventually get fired, of course. But to me, that's the differentiator of when you do it apples to apples. Like if you look at huge, massive holding company agencies and then you bucket it and call it like more of the agencies I work with, like mid-sized independent agencies. Yeah, like there's plenty of agencies who could build you a great website. Who are the people you want to work with and the process that's going to make your life easier.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, I have an agency partner. I had to have a tough conversation with them recently. And one of the things I mentioned was like, being a good partner means saying no. It means being brutally honest. It means being completely authentic. It, you know, the sales process is like that first conversation, the second conversation, and then you got to get really real. You have to like get in the dirt and like, you know, understand exactly where people are coming from and have an authentic relationship with them. And I think agencies, a lot of maybe the younger kind of inexperienced agencies make the mistake of offering everything and being a yes man. And that usually comes with the result of shitty work. And you can't say yes to everything. Sometimes clients are going to make outlandish requests and expect you to do it in a tight and shorter time frame. And sometimes it's just not possible. And you should say that it's not.
Really hard. I totally agree. And I think the best agencies I work with are the ones who tell me no, even when I call with certain opportunities to be like, hey, what do you think of this? And they're like, probably not. Coming from my old agency background, like we, in my opinion, were best at web design and development. We would do something great on the web design development side and the client would ask like, oh, can you do this as well? And we may say no like once and the client would be like, oh, come on. Like, you know, and they're basically like sometimes begging to give you money. And we would often then be like, all right, like we'll give it a try. And it would suck. Like we didn't have the process around that service and the people around it and stuff like that. So I think it's definitely an issue. And I appreciate when agencies tell me no, or even if they take a call, like that rarely happens, but there are times where like I'll make an introduction and I'm confident it's a great fit. And then like because of X, Y, and Z, which changed on the call or something like that, an agency will bow out. I get resoundingly positive feedback from the brand 100% of the time. Like, oh, they actually told us because of this thing that we didn't tell you, they're not a good fit and stuff. And that usually gains an incredible amount of social currency as well.
It really, really does. Yeah. I think niching out, being really, really good at one of three things is the best bet, and standing by that. There's nothing worse. I've been in that position too, where a salesperson doesn't think it's that big of a deal and will sell, kind of oversell. And then as an agency, you have to figure it out. You have to just deliver. And sometimes that means hiring externally. Sometimes that means just figuring it out. And that's not a good place to be in.
I have done that many times in my former life and made me physically ill, truthfully, like selling stuff that I didn't think we could do well.
It's exhausting.
It's interesting. You talked about, when an agency gets on the phone, like having an expert on call who has experience with your problem. You had mentioned, like, if it's a marketing problem, have a marketing expert and stuff like that. Interesting to hear that. I asked that question to basically everybody. This is episode 25, I believe, on theirs. Everybody wants something different. Like, there are plenty of people who are like, I don't want a team on a first call. Like, I want one person. I want to just have like a vibe check of sorts. Like, I just want to understand a little bit more. There are other people who are like, oh, I really appreciated that this agency brought all of their leadership onto the first call. Like, it's so all over the place, which my general, like, I don't even have a takeaway and I keep track of all this stuff. The takeaway is like, know your audience and ask a bunch of questions of what they want and what their expectations are, which I feel a lot of agencies miss the mark on, of like, they forget they can ask questions. Hey, like, we're going to have this intro call. Normally we treat them like X, Y, and Z. Is that your expectation for what this call will be and stuff like that? And knowing your audience is all that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the worst thing that you can do is, especially as a salesperson, if you don't know a lot, like you know the kind of surface, and you're selling on a lot of different things, but you don't know in depth a lot of the solutions that your team is capable of potentially. The worst thing is like trying to bullshit through it. SEO is a big thing with agencies, especially if you're building websites. And there is nothing worse than having to listen to a salesperson trying to bullshit their way through SEO. I mean, my God, it is awful and it's embarrassing. And so why try? Why not just say, hey, you know what? I can't answer that question. And we do have an in-house expert, and I'd love to connect you with them.
Gain more credibility.
Have them on the call. Yeah, exactly.
Having like PTSD of wondering, like, I think I'm reasonably knowledgeable on SEO, not like technical. I couldn't tell you the, ins and outs of it. I'm like, do I sound like I'm talking about bullshit when I talk about SEO now? So.
Yeah. Well, there, especially at, as you're growing through like a website redesign process, there's always like sometimes like a baked in layered like SEO package. And you're like, once you start to kind of look underneath the hood, you're like, what is this really? What are you actually doing? And usually when you start picking, that's when you get into this kind of ugly conversation.
That's fair. You had brought up specialization, which is a perfect segue into the next question. I've seen a big shift, especially since COVID, which it sounds like you agree with, but brands in general, a lot of larger brands, though, in particular, moving towards smaller independent agencies specialized in 1 to 2 services. Like, when you're looking for something specific, are you turned off by full service or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think it really, that's when things get really difficult to vet. And it's incredibly important as someone vetting the agencies to know what you want. Like, before even talking to anybody, create a list of a bullet point of exactly what you're looking for. So even if they are offering those other services, it might be a nice to have, but it's not a need to have. That's really important. But yeah, I mean, agencies make an issue. Like I said, it's part of that yes man mentality. Like, okay, we need to grow this. We don't want to lose this client to another agency, because the competition is so fierce that you end up saying yes to a lot, and you kind of build these weird lines of business, and you end up not being good at anything, or continuing to be good at 1 to 3 things, but still selling 6 to 8 things. And that's
one of my like things when I talk to a quote unquote full service agency, that I can usually tell if I'm interested in working with them or not. When they're like, oh, we're full service, I'm like, cool, what are you best at? And if they reel off like more than 2 things or 3 things, I'm like, that's, I don't know about, you can't just be best at everything. Even when I'm recommending full service agencies to someone like you, I'm like, hey, here's a full service agency. I think they're best at A, B, and C. They may sell you some other stuff. I don't know them for those things. Like, I'm not telling you to not buy those things from them, but like, here's my honest opinion of what they're best at when they do say that they're full service.
Yeah,
what's something that you think agencies oftentimes get wrong, or what's something you wish more agencies, quote unquote, got when talking to somebody in your position?
Honestly, yeah, I think just going back to saying no, like knowing your bandwidth, being super, super transparent and authentic. It's not rocket science, but again, I do think that there's a lot of pressure to say yes and to be good at a lot. And you're the consultant, I'm paying you. There's sort of that relationship baked in, like I'm paying you for a service, you're the consultant, like, go deliver. And that doesn't always end up well. And I think saying no and being honest about the capabilities and the relationship and the working style, and if it makes sense, is what a lot of agencies get wrong. I also think there is, nothing that can replace a really good project manager. Some people kind of make the mistake too of hiring more junior people as PMs, and that's a big, big, big mistake. A really good PM can navigate any situation, find the information that you need, and get the right people in front of you pretty quickly. And if they can't, they're communicating with you well along the way. You can have really good services and a bad PM, and it can completely ruin the experience.
Being on the sales side of an agency, that was the equivalent of me buying a beer for the CFO in your shoes, was me treating the PMs well to make sure that my clients got what they needed when they were supposed to and stuff like that.
Yes.
So I totally agree. We'll see what sort of outreach you get after this podcast. I hear from most people in the coming weeks after, people like are referencing things that you want. And like, so you're going to get a bunch that are like, I promise I'm transparent and that we will say no. Like, please take a call with us.
Yeah.
We shall see. You're going to have just an entire page of authenticity in some of these decks. But
yeah, I'll let you know.
What are you most bullish on in the marketing space in general? We've got artificial intelligence, which is taking over the world potentially, but taking over just in terms of like a buzzword and buzz industry and stuff like that. We've got NFTs still floating around. We've got metaverse, in-person events are back. What are you most excited about?
Honestly, you mentioned AI. I'm going to be honest, I'm totally on that train. I think it is.
You are or not?
I am. I think it is revolutionary for marketers specifically and salespeople too. I mean, the people that are not adopting that quickly will regret it. Just AI and automation in general, I think is incredibly smart, especially with budgets where they're at, especially when, not being able to hire the same way that we were, not having as big of a budget. Like that forces you into creating efficiencies. And what better way to create efficiency than automation and AI? It bleeds into so much. I could talk about this for another hour. But the way that I've been empowering my team, specifically starting off, is just how to integrate it into their own working rhythm. Like, what are things that you are doing that are taking time that could be automated, or that could get you 70% of the way there, and then you finish out the rest? And it's breeded some fun creativity from a content perspective, from just a collaborative working environment. We're just beginning to scratch the surface right now and really start to create, sort of playbooks, if you will, around how to work and integrate AI. And later next quarter, I'll be releasing playbooks to the entire sales team as well about like how to incorporate AI and automation into outreach. And, the truth of the matter is like most people are not good at writing. And if you can get better writing and get even better messaging that is on brand, because that's the piece that you're editing and changing, like, why not? So that's sort of where we're at right now. We also have been, we decided in January, at the end of last year, really, that we did a lot of restructuring surrounding our go-to-market approach. And some of that meant automating a lot of what a BDR does and putting BDRs in a different seat. We are incorporating Chili Piper for all inbound. You don't need people to schedule meetings anymore.
Sponsor me, Chili Piper. It's free press. Pay up.
I am a massive fan of Chili Piper.
Not sponsored yet. Not an ad.
Yeah. And even, in the support space, like I'm sure you've seen Intercom is integrating with Chat GPT, and what that can do to unlock a support team. People are fearful of it, and they're like, hey, like AI is coming for my job. I don't think about it that way. I think about it like, how can we be less reactive as a support team, So yeah, I think AI, it's changing everything that we're doing, and it's so exciting. I'm completely on that bandwagon.
I agree. I've used it. I've posted literally like close to every single day for 3 years on LinkedIn, and eventually you start losing your mojo of like, what the hell am I going to talk about? I've used ChatGPT for to get like thought starters and stuff like that, which give me like essentially a prompt. I give a prompt and it gives me back a prompt that I can write about, just to instead of staring at a blank screen. The biggest thing that I just can't wrap my head around, I guess, on the content front, if we're all giving it the same, if everybody starts using that for content, doesn't all the content start looking the exact same? That's what I can't. That's why, when I hear people freak out about it's going to take away writers, I'm like, I don't think so. I think writers should embrace it to a certain degree. I don't think it's a scary, at least currently, maybe in 5 or 10 years, we're all out of work and robots have taken over. But yeah, I can't wrap my head around that on the content side currently.
I mean, here's the thing. Right now, if you're scrolling through LinkedIn, there's really not a lot of authentic content out there anyway. I mean, even from the best of the best, the reason why the really good thought leaders out there are standing out is because they're creating content that isn't out there already. And I think consumers of that content are going to force the LinkedIns of the world and Googles of the world to change their algorithms to present more authentic and original content, because that's what we want to read. Nobody wants to read the top 10 tips that have been posted a million times before, right? And I think AI is actually going to help foster creativity because of that reason. It gets you 70% of the way there. And if you left it just as that, it would probably turn out to read as kind of tech bro content, if you will. I don't know if you've tried to generate a blog post, but that's
why I haven't gone viral yet. I can't do the tech. I hope people don't think I write like a tech bro. I just can't write the I don't know. I've tried to do it. I can't bring myself to do it.
That's the general tone and voice of a lot of these AI tools, is the tech bro-y, it's not great. So you need a really, really good writer and someone who's really good at brand to take that and to utilize it to generate ideas, to your point, or utilize it to get them 70% of the way there, and then instill that creativity back into it, that tone of voice, the messaging that is closer to your brand. I think that will always be there and probably become more prevalent because of AI.
Sure. What keeps you up at night from a marketing or business standpoint?
Yeah. Well, being a night owl, I stay up late.
What time do you go to sleep?
Gosh. I'm embarrassed to say this, but usually midnight, sometimes later.
I thought you were going to say 2 a.m. What time do you wake up? What time do you wake up though?
Honestly, usually 7 o'clock on the dot. So even if I stay up until 2, I'm up and working around 7, or going to the gym, do something else. Yeah.
Kyle Lacey, a couple interviews, who's CMO at Jelly. He wakes up 4:30 in the morning every morning. He's the current winner of the morning wake up.
Does he go to bed at 7 p.m. or something? I would not be able to do that.
I can't remember if I asked him when he goes to sleep or not. I'll have to go listen to the podcast so I can get another view on that episode.
Yeah.
I can't remember if he told me when he goes to sleep.
I got to admit, I am wildly jealous of people that are able to wake up really early in the morning and accomplish so much before anybody else even wakes up. I wish I was that way.
I've tried. I'm a 6:30 or 7 person, and have found to accomplish everything I need to at that time. But I've tried. I used to, many years ago, I was working out at say 5 in the morning for a month, and I don't love it. I like to break my day up with that. I'm like a 3 or 4 o'clock workout person when I'm able to. So yeah, props to Kyle.
Yeah.
It's impressive. I wish I had that bone in my body.
Yeah, same. But going back to your question, what keeps me up at night? It's a lot of things. I mean, it can be nothing, too out there, but like specific programs that I want to perform. What am I missing? What can I see? That's usually a lot of it. Like, what aren't you looking at right now? Where should you be? What aren't you measuring, unfortunately? Another really big thing, though, is just team performance and happiness. I really am very intentional about creating a collaborative, empowering, and inclusive work environment. And I think that it truly is like the foundation to a successful marketing team. So that's usually the top few things that keep me up at night.
That's fair. We'll do a couple fun ones to wrap up here. What was your very, very, very first job?
So I'm from Michigan. I don't know if they have these in other places of the country, but I was a server at Ruby Tuesdays.
We've got Ruby Tuesdays. We've got Ruby Tuesdays.
Okay, I didn't even know if it still existed, but
so sad. Great salad bar.
Really great salad bar. I have a lot of wonderful stories from that job, but I think everybody needs to, at some point in their lives, do some sort of service industry job because it's just, it builds character, you stay humble. So
I was a food expediter at an Italian restaurant for my very first legal job. I worked illegally at a car wash when I was like 13 or something. So yeah, I agree about the service.
I've done expo too. Yeah, stuff.
What would be your final meal? Maybe Ruby Tuesdays. Get back to your roots.
Yeah, they have some good desserts. I love desserts. Honestly, my final meal would probably be like a cinnamon roll or something, like something just like decadently.
You don't even want a meal sweet. First.
I don't even want a meal. I want something like absurdly sweet. I don't know, like an ice cream tower or something like that.
Love it. Perfect. And then my final question for you: who is somebody who inspires you, either personally or professionally, or both?
Yeah. God, there's so many areas of influence. I think I'm always really inspired by female leaders in the space. And usually those people are also really good at, establishing their own brand and fueling their own brand, definitely on places like LinkedIn. A few that come to mind are, the CMO at Cognizant, Alice, CMO at Sixth Sense, Latley. Yeah, like team. She's super great, so passionate about what she does. She's just a thought leader and always open to having conversations too. Those types of people that are, willing to have a call with you for 15 minutes to just chat, I think are also really awesome. Staying humble and gracious and
That's awesome. Hopefully that stays the same and AI isn't taking those general networking calls for people in the future.
Yeah, seriously.
But no, this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining. If anybody is interested, I'm guessing they can find you on LinkedIn. And then URL is what? homebot.ai, correct?
It is.
Awesome. Everybody go give some traffic to the site before a new one launches.
Please do. Thank you so much for the time today. It's been fun.
Yep. I will talk to you soon.
Thank you for checking out this episode of You Should Talk To. This show is brought to you by the company with the same name, You Should Talk To, a company that helps marketing leaders find the right agency or freelancer for their situation. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow You Should Talk To wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or visit youshouldtalkto.com for more information.